Hi, welcome back to the best training channel on YouTube. Today, I know everyone's gonna be like, we just saw you do cleans. Why are you doing cleans again? It just so happens that I'm able to film today, and today's a clean day again. But we are progressing the barbell by dropping it down a little bit lower. So now this is a position that I would call a low block power clean because the bar is below the knee. And I'm gonna be doing 3 repetitions on a low block power clean. And then I'm going to be pairing it with like this squatty hip flex box jump type focus that I'm doing here. So I'm gonna be starting in a squat position, trying to get my weight on the balls of my feet. I'm gonna initiate this movement. Rather than doing a counter movement in and of itself, I'm going to be firing through the hip, trying to pull my knee up as fast as I can, which is going to initiate the fall, react to the floor, and then jump up onto the box. Rather than just doing a counter movement jump, jumping up to the box, I'm taking away that counter movement by really just flexing through the hip quickly, dropping down, letting gravity pull me down versus allowing myself to fall down and then explode onto the box that way. So as you can see, it's not a deep fall. So what I'm really trying to do is just initiate some sort of downward momentum by quickly picking my feet up. And then as soon as I'm touching the floor, trying to react to the floor and explode up out of that bottom position as quickly as possible. So the reason I chose that variation on the box jump is that I just want to try to initiate some sort of rapid hip flexion into a reactive force off of the ground. So similar to what you'd be doing if you're sprinting, you're gonna have a rapid hip flexion and then you're gonna try to drive that foot down and react to the ground. Get used to producing force through the ground as you're falling into it, because even when you're sprinting, you'll notice that there's an oscillation. If you look at somebody sprint from the side, you'll see their hips will rise a little bit, drop a little bit, rise a little bit, drop a little bit. So there is a little bit of a drop as you make contact with the ground, and there's gonna be a little bit of a lift as you get into that toe off position. So this isn't, I wouldn't consider this still a like sprint specific type box jump, but it's just a variation of doing a box jump versus just doing a standard counter movement jump when you're doing your plyos. So that's the reason why I chose that there. All right, I'm gonna do something I don't normally do, and I'm just gonna send it. 140 for a top set. I was doing sets of 3. I'm just gonna do a set to technical failure just because the weights have been moving and I'm feeling really good. I wanna move some weight today. So what that means is that we're gonna probably do more than 3 and we're just gonna go until it doesn't feel good anymore. Ugh. 140 for 10. Let's take a moment. The lungs were not ready for 140 by 10. And my thighs were also not ready for 140 by 10. But like I said, the weight was feeling good. And I don't know why, but I just decided I wanted to do a max effort set or a technical effort set. I would never do max effort on Olympic lift for repetitions. I would more so focus on like the technical aspect of it. So if I'm gonna be doing a lot of like any sort of Olympic lift that's going to have a high number of repetitions, then I'm looking for technical failure versus like absolute failure. Unless I'm building up to like a 1 rep max, then more often than not, once you get close to that 1 rep max range, the technique's going to lack and you might be strong enough to still get through the movement. So I wouldn't consider that a moment where you'd want to go to technical failure. You want, like, you're trying to lift as much as possible, so going to absolute failure is fine. But if you're doing multiple repetitions, or you could be doing an EMOM if you're working on work capacity, if you're doing anything that's going to be more than 3, 4, 5 repetitions in a single set, technical failure should be like the point in which the movement, let's say you're still completing the repetitions, but now you're starting to really lack the technique that is ideal for making that movement work in the way it's supposed to. But like I said, I don't know why. I just got that idea in my head that I wanted to go and just rip the bar up because it was feeling really good, which it should, because the progression is we go from a high box to a low box. Low box means greater bar path or a greater distance that the bar is going to need to move. That's going to allow me to create more velocity on the bar, essentially making the bar move quicker and feel easier. So last training block, I ended with a 170 power off of a high block. I would imagine I could get something like a 180 to a 185 off of this low block. And then from the floor, probably like a 185 to a 190. I've always noticed that my low block and my floor kind of stay the same. I don't really see a huge difference between those, but my high block into my low block, there's generally a 10-ish% difference from what my max efforts are on that. I still have jumps to do, and I'm just sitting on this box talking, so. Whew. All right, 3 jumps. All right, now we're gonna do some isos to finish off today's session. I got 2 isos I'm gonna do. Quarter squat position and then calf iso. These are both gonna be overcoming. So we're gonna be trying to move an immovable object. So we'll just load a barbell up to a heavy load where I'm not gonna be able to actually lift it. And then we're gonna be doing some high effort, short duration time. So something like 2 seconds per repetition and keep the reps relatively low because we're trying to keep the effort on each of these as high as possible. So I'm gonna unload the barbell, set up a squat rack, get everything ready, and then we're gonna get into the overcoming isos. All right, so iso number 1, I'm going to be doing a quarter squat position, single leg at a time. So let me slide this barbell over a little bit. There we go. So what that means is I kind of want to be in this quarter squat position or relatively close to it, get into a position where that foot is kind of directly below the hip, probably a little bit out in front, but I'm gonna be trying to push up against this barbell as hard as I can for 2 seconds, switch to the other side, push as hard as I can for 2 seconds, and do probably 2 to 3 reps on each side. And then what I'm gonna do is pair it with a B stance box jump. So B stance or staggered stance, whatever you wanna call it. I'm still gonna be pushing off of both legs, but the majority of that force is gonna come from this front leg. And I'm just gonna do 1 rep on each side with this. Probably gonna end up doing 3 at a minimum. And if it still feels like the jumps are springy and poppy, I might do a 4th set on this one today. All right, so as you probably noticed on that first set, the barbell was actually lifting up off of the squat rack a little bit. And in all honesty, something like that is okay. When you're doing an overcoming iso, it is technically supposed to be pushing against an immovable object. I like to load up a barbell and try to move that barbell as much as possible. Even if that bar starts coming off the rack about a quarter of an inch, a half an inch, or 1 or 2 centimeters, or whatever it might be, that still means you're putting in as much force as you possibly can to get that bar to move that fraction of an inch or that fraction of a centimeter. So it's not necessarily a bad thing because the barbell is lifting up, and because you're only holding it for 2 seconds, it's still a high amount of force being produced. The barbell moving is fine. You're still getting done the intent of what that movement's gonna be. Plus, when you feel that barbell kind of move a little bit and you kind of get that little bit of movement there, it almost gives you a sense of like, I'm gonna push even harder to try to get this thing up off of the rack or to try to move this barbell a little bit heavier. I know some coaches who actually prefer doing like a loaded overcoming iso into an immovable object. So what you'll see them do is they'll have like a squat rack set up with arms just above, and they'll actually start with the bar loaded at 50, 60%, and they'll move the bar into the immovable object because they feel that it allows the athlete to put more effort into that push. So to each their own, get the work done. There's 100 different ways to do the same thing. So we're gonna try to move the bar again though. I forgot what leg I started there with for a second. All right, so let me explain real quick. I feel like I've explained this before on the channel, but we're getting a lot of new subscribers. I want to make sure that everyone understands what's going on here. So we're going from a very heavy, immovable object into a body weight explosive movement. So what's really happening is you're trying to push against something. You're telling your nervous system that we need to recruit any and everything that we can to try to move this immovable object. And then you do that for multiple repetitions. What that does is that gets the nervous system cranked up and heightened, going, oh shit, we got to really turn it up right now because we're doing something extremely hard. Then you move into a body weight movement. That nervous system is still firing on all cylinders. It's ready to go. You mimic the same joint angles. You hit the same muscle groups, almost doing kind of like the same pattern of movement, even though the first one isn't a movement. And then you explode through. You're getting more activation in those jumps than if you were to just do those jumps by themselves as part of the workout. So by preloading up your nervous system with an immovable, heavy isometric, it could also be a 1 rep max effort or a 2 rep max effort type thing that's still going to be very similar, even though not identical. And then moving into a very light body weight or explosive movement. You could do a med ball throw with some other movements paired into it. What that does is that fires those muscles at a rate much faster than if you were doing it by itself. So that's kind of what's going on today. I always get this example of, I used to work for a moving company when I was in school. So in the summer times, we'd have to load up boxes, put dishes in them, put everybody's shit in a box, and then walk it out to the truck. Sometimes what we would do to play a trick on a guy is there would be a ton of boxes in there, and usually they'd be pretty heavy. So like dishes from the kitchen, pots and pans, things that are gonna be heavier boxes. And we would load up one box that didn't have anything in it, and we would write dishes on it. So he's going through, he'd pick up a box, load it onto the hand truck. These things are heavy. He's so used to doing it over and over and over again. And then he gets to that light one, still thinking that it's going to be a heavy box. What ends up happening is the dude ends up like throwing the box and almost falling backwards because his nervous system and his mind is telling him that this is going to be a very heavy object comparable to what we just did. And then he goes and it's nothing inside except for an empty cardboard box. So for him, he's firing on all cylinders and just launching this box into the air, which is a very unsophisticated way to explain what's happening during this right now. So we're gonna move on to the second ISO, which is going to be a calf ISO, and we're gonna pair that with a pogo hop, and then that's gonna be it for the rest of the session. But before we move on to the next part, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe because I appreciate you guys being here. Drop a comment for the algo as well if you got enough time. Type that in there real quick, and then we'll move on to the next ISO. All right, the last ISO for today is going to be very similar intent on what we did. We're just working in a different position, different muscle group. So rather than doing that quarter squat, trying to push up against an immovable object, we're going to be in a more extended position, and the bar is going to be placed at a height to where I can actually get up onto my toe and push into that bar, because I'm specifically trying to hit the calf area on this isometric here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to get myself into a position where that foot is going to be somewhere pretty close to below the hip. You could also be a little bit behind the hip if you'd want, but you're going to be trying to get up on that toe, push through, 2 seconds. And then we're going to pair that with a pogo hop for height, hands on the hips, focusing on as we approach the ground, we want to be in a dorsiflex position, and then right as we're about to hit the ground, we want to extend through and try to pop off the ground as quickly as possible on each one of these pogos. We're just going to do 5 reps on the pogo hop. And that's it for the session today. So I appreciate you guys watching. I'm going to do a few more sets, but I'll catch you guys in the next one.